Hi. And please come up, the next panelists. I've been given the unenviable task of hosting the last panel of the day, where it is absolutely critical we remain on time because the next item on the agenda, it says, is cocktails, and I absolutely know I would be a very bad moderator. I can take 10 more minutes, but I know how thirsty you all look, so I'm gonna try and not keep you from whatever it is that's brewing over there in the stand-up kitchens. I'm delighted to be joined today. My name is Jack Schicker. I'm a regulatory reporter for Europe at CoinDesk, and I'm joined by Faustine Fleuret, the President and Director General of ADAN, the French crypto advocacy group, and John Hoops, who is Head of Ecosystem at the Toucan protocol. Two very different perspectives on a fascinating topic, which is the environmental impact of crypto and what everything that crypto and the blockchain can do for better and for worse at a time when Europe is struggling to change its sources of energy, facing extremely high energy prices, and the prospect of a winter in which many people will have supplies cut off or even face blackouts of energy, and it's one of the big topics that is occurring in Europe right now. So it would be remiss of the European Crypto Initiative not to put this item on its agenda and how crypto can help or hinder this. Faustine, I'm going to start with you a bit to get us into this topic because this is often presented as a great problem of crypto. When you hear some policymakers, lawmakers talk about it, they say, there's a sector that has the same energy consumption as a country the size of the Netherlands, and that's a lot of energy, which it is. Do you think that's the right way of presenting this debate, and what can the crypto community do to kind of improve the quality of that debate?
Hi everyone, thank you for inviting me today. Yes, I think that's one of the most detrimental preconceived idea that is circulating around crypto assets is about the fact that they are polluting too much, a lot like at the level of countries. But actually I think this debate must be well understood by the general public. And the first thing to explain them is that crypto assets are really different, really heterogeneous, and that they function on really different protocols. And so maybe if there is a debate about the energy consumption, we have to look on which type of protocols and crypto assets these debates can happen. And that's why you have to explain that you have the mining, the proof of work, and that is a word that is often frightening people, but that you have other way to make the protocols run, and that in such for those protocols actually you don't have the same the same level of energy consumption that is involved. And I think what was really positive in September is that this difference between protocols was right with the merge of Ethereum, the transition of Ethereum from proof of work to proof of stake. And I think thanks to that, the general public understood a little bit more that there were different technological functioning behind blockchain. So if we have this, we have to explain this first, and then we have to explain, and I think that's something that is not well understood right now, what's the opportunity, what's the utility of mining, of actually securing the network. And I think if people don't really understand the opportunity behind mining, of course mining requires energy consumption, but mining is essential for the network to run, to secure the register of transactions, and to be able to validate and to execute transactions on the network. So maybe we have to better highlight the opportunities of this new functioning behind executing transaction on chain. That is the difference with the emergence of Bitcoin and other crypto assets. And once the general public, but also regulators, will better understand also the opportunity for sovereignty, digital sovereignty, to master, to control the validation and the securitization of a network, maybe this preconceived idea will be a bit harder to make circulate by the people that don't really like crypto assets.
Indeed, indeed, and as you say, that the big news story about the Ethereum merge when it transferred from one mining technique to another was a pretty good example of this topic entering the mainstream media in a positive way, because it showed that the crypto sector is able to change. I definitely like to come back to some of those topics in a bit more detail, but I'd also like to turn to John, because you've got the other side of this. You've got the other side of this debate, which is what positive contribution blockchain technology in the most general way can make to this challenge of the energy transition and fighting climate change. Tell me a bit about what you're doing at Toucan Protocol in this area.
Yeah, I think, well, first off, again, thanks, as everyone said, thanks so much for having me. My name is John Hoops. I'm one of the co-founders of Toucan Protocol. And I think it actually is a perfect segue from Faustine's comments. She mentioned the opportunities, right? What can be built on the technologies that are kind of under discussion today, and that's really the perspective I come with, right? So it's been fascinating to listen. I've been learning so much. This is not my native territory. Learning about the conversations being had in the halls of Brussels is fascinating. I'm a builder, right? We're a seed stage technology startup. In Toucan, we're building the infrastructure for a regenerative economy, and our goal, our mission, is to finance climate action at scale. Right, we're in a situation right now where we are facing a multi-trillion-dollar funding gap to address climate change and keep global warming. I mean, from what I saw at the COP27 conference, 1.5 degrees is pretty much off the table at this point. But 2 degrees Celsius is sort of a new stretch goal for humanity to limit warming to. And this means we have to change our behavior as a species, right? We have to change the amount of greenhouse gases we're emitting, and we also need to draw down carbon dioxide at gigaton scale. And this needs to happen over the next few decades. And this is going to require a multi-trillion-dollar value transfer, most of which is going to be from funding sources in the global north to impact creators in the global south. And so that's what Toucan is built to do, right? We are infrastructure that's designed to underpin the voluntary carbon market. Voluntary carbon market is a market set up to finance impact creators through this financial instrument, the carbon credit. And we've built Toucan using the best available financial technology we could find, which happened to be smart contracts, right? Smart contracts is a sort of financial technology that's enabled by blockchains and that runs on blockchains, and is really kind of forms a very low friction financial environment that's globally accessible. And what we've done is we've essentially designed a carbon credit registry that runs on smart contracts, and we've built a bridge where people can transfer carbon credits from a certified registry onto this open climate registry we've built, where they're represented as a carbon token. And this is very powerful innovation for a number of reasons, which I can get into in a bit. Yeah, I suppose this is sort of kind of the layer above this question of how energy intensive is it to operate these networks. Once we kind of accept that, okay, there are quite energy intensive ways, proof of work, and then there are much less energy intensive ways to securely run these digital systems, what applications can be built on this really reliable data storage and computing system, and that's really what we're diving into.
And just to dig in a bit there, I mean, this obviously sounds like a very worthy initiative, but why is the blockchain, why is Web3 important in what you're trying to do? Because carbon markets already existed for a number of years. Could you do this without the blockchain?
Yeah. So carbon markets have been running for about 25 years now, right, since the Kyoto Protocol. There have been a lot of successes. A lot of really great work has been financed using carbon credits, but there are also a lot of issues with the way the markets have emerged and evolved. Those issues really revolve around a few problems related to accessibility, related to trust and related to transparency in the way that the market works. And each of those are actually real strengths of crypto systems, right? Crypto systems are open access by design. In the lingo, they call them permissionless, right? They're meant to be trustless. I don't really like that word. I think of them more as trust conscious, right? Aware of where trust is accumulating in the system and recognizing that trust is a form of power, being thoughtful about who we trust our information with and who we trust that power with. And then as far as the transparency, a lot of the voluntary carbon market now is beset by kind of backdoor dealings or closed dealings in emails, and negotiating procurement of carbon credits is a lengthy manual process, emailing back and forth spreadsheets. There's no clear, transparent price for carbon credits or for kind of classes of carbon credits. And by bringing them onto a blockchain, we open up and kind of bring visibility to a lot of the way the market works on the supply side, in the market side, as well as on the demand side.
Okay, so trust and transparency being key there, which are words that you'll hear a lot in the crypto ecosystem. Faustine, I want to come back a bit to talk about kind of EU policy, because we've talked quite a lot about it, but that's what we're here for. Mika, that we've talked about a lot about today, had a real near miss in terms of kind of its energy policy. Do you want to talk us through what happened there, what nearly happened there, what didn't happen, and where kind of EU policymakers are now on this debate?
Yeah, the environmental treatment of activities in crypto assets in Mika was a really big story with lots of developments, because actually at the very beginning, with the first draft released by the European Commission, there was nothing about the environmental question of crypto assets, and the debates come with lots of preconceived ideas that we dealt with at the beginning of the panel, that were circulating a lot. And at one point, there were different positions that were debated, from very strict ones, with the limitation of the use of some protocols, and actually this was aimed at proof of work. So there was one idea that issuers of crypto assets or crypto asset service providers could be limited in using proof of work protocols to issue or to provide services on crypto assets to the EU public. And this was a really strict and actually really non-constructive approach to say that, because first for the technological neutrality principle, but also because you would actually not reach the goal of onboarding the industry in the fight against the climate change that we are actually leading in the Europe, and with the Green Deal, if you are putting too prohibitive, too hard rules, and that's, I think, the case for any other type of regulation. But if you're putting too strict rules, actually you won't onboard those companies, but you will push them to go abroad and to go in some areas where maybe the fight against the climate change is not the priority as it is in Europe. So we were really against this approach. It was called sometimes ban of proof of work, if some people in the area follow this story. And in front of this really hard position, there was another one asking for the mining industry, which was targeting at maybe the issue behind the energy consumption, to comply with the EU taxonomy. That is a regulation that is not crypto specific, but that could actually apply to other non-financial actors like miners. So at some point there were those two positions that were on the table, but at the end, in the final MiCA, none of them are in the final text. And what has been chosen is to ask for information requirements on the adverse impact of protocols by issuers and by crypto asset service providers. So a really more pragmatic approach, because we all need, and for any topic, to know what is the environmental footprint of the activities that the service that we wanna that we are asking for the crypto assets that we wanna buy. So it's really normal that we have this information to be delivered to the public, and it's really more pragmatic. But so that's in the final MiCA text, but the story is not ended anyway, because it's already in the next MiCA, I would say, text, what we can call sometimes MiCA 2. But the European Commission want to address this topic maybe a little bit with more time in the long term, and to see if there are other requirements to apply to issuers and the providers of crypto asset services. So they will need to, in a very long term, like I think it's 4 years after the entry into force of MiCA that will come into force, so next year, they will have 4 years to think about what could be new obligations for crypto markets in terms of environmental, maybe more than disclosure, and so that's something that we need to follow as industry representatives to be sure that it's still pragmatic and still constructive.
Sure. We came pretty close to that Bitcoin ban, or what has been described as a Bitcoin ban, but now it seems that they're leaning towards more kind of investor information kind of. I mean, you hear sometimes people talk about the eco labels, which if you've ever bought a car or a fridge or anything recently, you'll recognize the kind of grading system they have, so you know how much this thing is going to cost you in terms of energy usage over its lifetime. Is that something you think you could plausibly see in the crypto world, that you're on your crypto exchange, and before you buy your crypto it says this one's green, this one will get you better returns, but this one's greener. How does investor information actually work in the crypto space, do you think? Anyone who's crazy enough to answer?
No, actually, we were talking maybe a lot about MiCA today, but there are other regulations that are related to the environmental topic that will apply to this crypto world. And for example, you have the corporate sustainability due diligence. So it will mean for maybe the largest CASPs, but anyway, those actors, they will need to identify, to prevent, to mitigate, and to end the adverse impact of their activities on the environment. Mm-hmm. You have the corporate sustainability reporting directive. You will have as a CASP also to disclose your policy that prevents like social justice and environmental impact too. So this is really concrete. I mean, it will enter into force in the coming years. But you also have other texts at this stage. Markets of in crypto assets are not in the scope, but we can expect that it will change with the debates going on. So, for example, the taxonomy that I was talking about before. So. The goal of the taxonomy is to help orientate the investment towards the sustainable activities. For the moment, it's really targeting financial actors, but we had the question of should we integrate miners in this taxonomy? So why not crypto markets could be included in the coming years? And also the texts that apply to the financial entities like SFDR. And that's even important to notice that for CASP, you could be asked by those financial entities in the coming years for the environmental impact, to disclose the environmental of your activities for those obliged entities, those financial institutions you will work with, you will be in partnership with, you will have to be ready to give those information. So actually you have MiCA, but not only, and that's coming tomorrow.
Yeah, indeed, plenty going on that has an impact on crypto. And maybe, as you say, it won't be at the level of the retail investor, but of an investment fund that's trying to figure out how green its portfolio is. The previous panel was about international action, and I'm quite interested in what role that might play in this. I mean, John, you already talked about the massive transfer of funding that needs to take place from the global north to the global south as part of this transition. obviously the rules and the COP that we saw in Egypt is a lot about international action. What's the scope for and likelihood of something happening on the international stage in terms of kind of the environmental performance of blockchain and crypto?
So I'll speak more, I think I can speak better to the utility of blockchains in helping with this international carbon accounting challenge that we have, right? Because we have, again, this situation where each country is making commitments, which they're calling their nationally determined contributions to decarbonization efforts in alignment with the Paris Agreement. And what this really comes down to is a big carbon accounting question on the level of nation states. And we're, again, kind of maybe straying out of my real native territory here, but from what, well, blockchain kind of, a blockchain is a really useful tool for this global accounting system and global kind of accounting ledger. And right now there's a project that's being undertaken by the World Bank, which is called the Climate Warehouse, which is essentially this idea of let's have a sort of global ledger where we keep track of all of the impact certificates, carbon credits that are produced around the world, and who is consuming them to apply them to their nationally determined contributions. Because what's going to end up happening is kind of global south players that have a big opportunity for nature-based solutions, right? Reforestation efforts, peatland restoration, mangrove restoration. What they're really going to end up doing is actually exporting their carbon drawdown to heavily polluting countries that have a lot more money but have a lot less kind of opportunity to engage in this kind of large-scale carbon removal, especially as we ramp up our technology-based carbon removal capacity. And so blockchain is a real natural accounting tool for that. And that's something that I know Toucan is in conversations with that kind of consortium, along with Filecoin Green, which is doing a lot of really interesting work in building the data infrastructure to underpin environmental asset markets, as well as some of these accounting questions. So again, the role, you kind of have greening the crypto industry, but then you have how can crypto help the world green itself, and that's kind of a little more where I'm kind of playing. Faustine, I don't know, maybe you could speak a little more to how the crypto industry might contribute to that. I don't know, maybe you already even covered it though.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think that's a topic that is not really known today, is that we often talk about, and especially the mining industry, as detrimental to the environment, but we don't see how it can be an industry to be leveraged in the fight for the climate transition. And that's very important, because actually there are really great opportunities that we can encourage with some public measures to promote this help. So, but first, I don't think that the fight against the climate change is quite a new concern for the industry. We already know some initiative, like the Crypto Climate Accord, that is a group of companies that wish to reach zero net emission by 2030. Sorry. We have technological innovations that help to reduce the impact, the environmental impact of the function of blockchains, like Lightning Network or the merge that we were talking previously. And if we look at the renewables in the mining, Bitcoin mining energy mix, what we can see over the past few years is that this renewable parts is always growing and growing, and I think we can estimate around 60% of the renewables parts of the Bitcoin energy mix. So it's not a new concern first, but it can be still leveraged even more. First, because, and especially in the current crisis context, miners need to find the cheapest source of energy possible. And what's interesting to see is that to find this cheap energy, they will look at where this energy is today wasted or not sold, and this is especially renewables that can be leveraged. So if considering that you don't really need to produce more actually to mine Bitcoin or crypto assets tomorrow. And to the contrary, what we see is that by optimizing this energy production of renewables, you are funding also the creation of new renewable production system, and that's the case of some French actors that we represent at the association, like BlackRock Data Center or Sisters, that are miners that are, thanks to this, because they can plug to those production systems, they are increasing the profitability of those systems, and they can actually build more. So that's very interesting. And what we also see is that you can reuse the heat of this mining to hit some buildings and some schools and some swimming pools that are very interesting initiatives that we also less know. What we also see is that miners can recycle some gas, greenhouse emissions. We often talk about CO2, but actually you have also other very bad gas, polluting gas. And miners can recycle methane, for example, produced by oil and gas companies in the context of gas flaring. That is something that you can't avoid in those industry. And by recycling this methane, by mining thanks to this methane, actually you have a quite positive impact, because of course there is CO2 that is released in the atmosphere anyway, but it's less worse actually than methane. So we can also promote this by creating partnership between those production system and miners, as well as we should promote the the plugging of those miners with the production systems, because miners, and that's something that was highlighted by the company in Texas that is operating the energy grid, that is also helping balance the energy grid thanks to miners, because they are really mobile and really flexible. So, and that's something that we can't find in other industries today.
I mean, that sounds sort of very encouraging, that there's all these potential initiatives out there. I guess if I was a policymaker watching this debate, I don't know if any policy makers are now still watching, I hope so, I'd be saying, you know, that's great. What can policy, what can legislation do to encourage even more of that? If 60% of this energy is renewable, but 40% isn't, how can you use good policy to kind of encourage that even more? Does policy help or hinder here? And I mean, I'm thinking of initiatives like in New York State, there's been a law recently that says, okay, Bitcoin or crypto mining from now on can only use renewable energy. You can't open new facilities using fossil fuels. Do you think that's helpful, or does that have a kind of unintended impact on the industry?
That's for me again. Okay, if I take France as an example, for the moment, at this stage, there is no really promotion of the opportunity of crypto asset activities, and but they are currently thinking about first assessing and better understanding what are all the implications of the crypto asset industry for environment. So there was a law last year in France for reducing the energy consumption of the digital economy. And in the context of this law, France, the government, had to release a report, and I'm afraid I wanted to speak about this report because it was supposed to be published last month, and we are still expecting for this report. But France the government must release a report on the environmental impact of crypto assets in the context of this more general law. And the goal of this report was first to be like a reference in terms of okay, we don't have that much sources about the environmental impact of crypto asset, not much public sources, and France actually wanted to release this one as a first benchmark, and then to think about public policies to be in place. But I'm afraid I won't be able to comment this report because we are still waiting for it. But the very positive thing is that the industry companies in France and Europe were associated to this work by the government. So we were received by the French Treasury and the government with a delegation of entrepreneurs to make them understand how it works and what could be helpful for them. For example, I was, as an example, giving partnership to be promoted between miners and some energy producers. We also had proposals regarding taxation to better encourage the use of renewables. So the positive thing is that the government was hearing us. Now we have to see if in the report it's something that they will really take into account, and if they will transform those words into a concrete support for the industry.
Indeed, we'd all like to see that, and I guess we'll all be watching to see this French government report whenever it does come out, because it sounds like it's can be very interesting. I'm going to turn to the audience now because I can't think of any more intelligent questions. So I'm going to see if any of you have any. Does anyone have any questions on the environmental impact of crypto for this excellent panel? Gentleman over there, yeah.
Hugo from Portugal. Just curious about the panel's perspective on yesterday's comments from Fabio Panetta, who again remarked that Europe should ban crypto assets that are deemed to have an excessive ecological footprint. And naturally, this sounds good, but is it even feasible? And how do you tackle such a problem of a global scale? Because if suddenly mine allows Bitcoin mining again, we cannot control if the ecological impact of Bitcoin is good or bad.
Good question. There was a speech from Fabio Panetta from the European Central Bank yesterday that was another argument largely against crypto assets. I mean, we know the EU has banned energy-intensive kettles, it's banned energy-intensive hoovers, it's banned energy-inefficient cars. They like banning things. Will crypto be next? Should it be next?
Yeah, I got to skim through some of Panetta's remarks, and he made some bold assertions. And I think some of them were really true, and some of them I don't feel stand up to scrutiny. But I think on this sort of idea of banning crypto, we have to remember this stuff was designed by deeply skeptical people explicitly to be impossible to ban. So I don't know if I fully see how that would be actioned. That said, I think there may be steps to take to minimize the environmental impact and minimize some of consumer risks associated with proof of work mining and with some of the more speculative use cases for crypto. But I think he also kind of basically came out and said that crypto is just for gambling. And this I really take issue with because I'm spending a lot of my time going very deep on the use cases of the technology that go beyond gambling. So things like digital governance, some very interesting things happening with the smart contracts designed to kind of create these collective decision-making structures. For example, conviction voting, I think, is a very interesting idea, quadratic voting. Identity management with verifiable credentials and decentralized identifiers, new forms of organizational design with DAOs, really interesting work in public goods funding coming out of the Gitcoin community and other communities in that kind of corner of Web3. And so for him to kind of say, there's nothing here, it kind of feels a little misinformed, or maybe he's just trying to be a bit kind of provocative. But I really am, I'm here because I'm convinced there's a baby in the bathwater, and if we throw the whole thing out, then we might miss a major opportunity. And in my case, this is an opportunity to innovate towards climate finance. And climate change is a situation where we cannot be cutting off any pathways to innovation right now.
Faustine, is Fabio Panetta on your Christmas card list?
Neither the ECB, no. I mean, the question was raised in MiCA, and the solution was not that we had to ban any type of protocol in Europe, and it would not be feasible. And actually, it it would create a precedent. I mean, we never had this question in other industry, or in another solution that was chosen in other industries. So I think the solution was already found in Mika, and that's not this one.
Okay, the lady over here, you were asking a question? Yeah.
I'll make a statement first. So the statement is not to use less energy, but what type of energy do we actually use? It's probably a better way of looking of the challenges that we're facing today. So my question to you would be, how active is the crypto ecosystem, and maybe you in particular, in advocating different energy sources for use for us all? Because it is a massive challenge. Indeed.
What role can the crypto community itself play in advocating this alongside regulators and policymakers?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Is the association prompting the members to use renewable rather than other sources of energy? That's it?
Not using less energy, but using different sources of energy. And we're talking hydrogen, we're talking nuclear, and other energy sources that are less polluting. Because if we stop consuming energy, of course, we will, as a society, start our plateauing and decline, etc., etc.
And do you mean in the crypto sector particularly, or sort of in general across the economy? What can crypto companies do?
Crypto sector in particular, when answering this question, crypto is polluting. So advocating better energy sources.
It's a good question. Are you aware of initiatives within the crypto sector that are trying to promote that renewable energy?
I've seen some interesting arguments that proof of work mining kind of can act as a subsidy for the development of renewable capacity, because in those moments of load shedding, because there's overproduction and the grid doesn't need, on a windy, sunny day, for example, when the grid isn't consuming that much energy, the energy could be diverted into crypto mining and be an additional form of revenue. So I think that's a reasonably interesting concept, but I don't know if I fully agree with what I thought I heard you say, which is that we shouldn't be reducing our energy consumption. I think Ethereum is an example of a massive system, a massive industry initiative that decarbonized by orders of magnitude. I think it's 99.992 something % less energy consumption with Ethereum proof of stake than Ethereum proof of work. I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think that's...
I agree.
Okay, perfect.
But it's more as a society. So if we talk about using less energy as a society, what you quite often see is gross national product is linked to the amount of energy we consume. So by advocating that, let's spend less energy, ultimately our gross national product will go down. This is what we've seen historically. So it's
okay. I think we've understood your point. It's a very good point, but I want time for one more question. Before we stop, there's one question from over here.
So ESMO will have to come up with a green label next year, right? In the follow-up to Mika. Do you think that it's technically possible for that green label to say not only what protocol the asset was created on or what consensus mechanism it proved, but also the energy mix that was used to mine it? So can we tell a green Bitcoin from a brown Bitcoin, for example?
I think from what I know about research into the energy consumption of consensus networks, which again, I'm not an expert on, but I think there is quite sophisticated research into this, down to where are nodes positioned, where's hash power located, what is the kind of energy mix of that particular region. I don't know off the top of my head the research, but there's a couple of kind of leading researchers that are working on this. I think I've thought about this idea in the past, right? Somehow using colored coins or something similar in Bitcoin to tag a Bitcoin as having come from a renewable an operator running on renewables, it in a way kind of undermines the fungibility question. Would you then see divergence where green Bitcoins have a premium over brown Bitcoins? You know, I don't know if it necessarily would really work. Yeah, exactly, and that's it. Like, just because a Bitcoin was mined by one validator that was running on renewables, the rest of the network still was running at that time and still had to be running at that time for it to be secure. So I think I don't know if the argument really stands up to scrutiny. But I do think that we can know quite a lot more in real time about the energy consumption of a crypto network than, say, private corporations, servers, or what is the energy consumption of streaming a Netflix show or sending a Visa transaction. That's not something we really talk about in these conversations. And the truth is, Web 2 consumes a lot of energy as well. And so I think open systems have some advantages in terms of transparency and verifiability, observability that we can lean into and use to kind of pioneer sustainability reporting. And I do see independent research going into that, but I don't know exactly what the state. I think Crypto Climate Accord probably would be a good place to go if you wanted to dig into the state of the conversation on that.
Indeed, it sounds like a very complicated question to do in any financial market, but a very valid one that ESMA will now have to get to grips with. That is definitely all we've got time for, although I could definitely talk about this for another hour or so, but I'm not going to do that because, as Bertie says, we need to close up and move on to the next stage. Are we having some closing words from our organisers? I think you deserve it.